Aileen Rizzo and Bev Ford from the AIM Center for Math and Science Education will be presenting in Breakout Room 1. Their presentation, STEAM Stories with Bricks, will explore ways that play can integrate algebraic reasoning and spatial skills. You will want to have blocks, at least 6 cubes and 6 rectangular prisms, or DUPLOs or Legos on hand for this breakout session.
Hi, I'm Aileen Rizzo. I'm Associate Director of the AIM Center.
Hi, I'm Bev Ford, and I'm a PK Coordinator at the AIM Center. The activities we're going to talk about today explore how we can gather information through playful interactions with students and bricks. So, Aileen, tell us stories about how you have interacted with kids using bricks and just a playful interaction.
Well, I was able to do a lot of work at the Head Start regionally, and we really worked with children around what they were coming to know in mathematics. And through that, perhaps many of you have seen some of these interviews where they're very structured and you have some videos, and usually it's one-on-one. And we did some of those to kind of see where children are, what were they thinking, how they were thinking mathematically. But we were noticing as we were creating activities to do in small centers that were playful, either games or had narratives with them, that we were seeing children go farther than what we were seeing in the very scripted one-on-one interview. So I really feel like one of the ways that I've seen bricks use is, yes, in playful ways that children do during free play, but also we could use them in small centers where perhaps as teachers we can notice a little bit more of what children are doing, because in play we don't have maybe the anxiety of having to perform or having to come up with the right answer, and that really alleviates our brain to think a little bit more, to be a problem solver in ways that maybe are creative and innovative, but also without the inhibitions that you might feel. And so little kids start feeling those inhibitions, maybe the same things we feel when we think about a math test. A little child can start feeling that even at a young age when we do these scripted interviews. So I really felt that in playful ways, through stories and through things that children do naturally, we can really see what children can do mathematically.
Awesome. It sounds like that playful energy just allowed the kids to be able to relax and show you what they knew, as opposed to sometimes we all know we get a little nervous and then it's like, oh, I can't remember that thing. I know it. So that's awesome. And today is all about just integrating stories and play and bricks together. So what are some things that you see with using Legos and stories to teach math?
Yeah, so we were thinking, Bev and I were thinking about a lot of these things, and we were thinking about some of these stories that maybe are a little bit more familiar to us, the stories that a lot of us have heard over and over again and retold to children. And we were thinking about how we can not only tell a story, but how it's great to use stories through play, because children naturally do that, either when they see maybe a cartoon or animation, or they know about a story, they try to reenact that through their imagination. And anything with bricks is a great way to, so whether you have like DUPLOs or small bricks or whatever, you can use things to recreate those pieces. And you see children do that with things that you wouldn't even consider, maybe the cardboard box that just came in, different things like that. So Bev, you wanted to share a little bit of maybe just using stories and then how we can just foster that imagination.
Exactly. When I think about like towers that are built, and my girls loved Rapunzel and how she could be at the top of the tower, or maybe it's a car that was built, and the stories just become these settings that really make imaginative play and Legos really fun for a lot of kids. Maybe kids that would not be as drawn to it, because I also have a child that loves to build just to build, because they're just totally intrigued with how tall or engineering. So part of the heart behind this session today is just to kind of interact, and whether it's stories or whether it's the bricks that is your draw as a child, when you put them together, you kind of have that broader audience of kids that can show you what they know in that kind of playful context. So like, for example, my kids loved the book by Dr. Seuss, Go Dog Go. And so that has a dog in a car going all these different places, and then a tree at the end where all the dogs end up in the tree. I mean, the kids could build a tree with Legos. They could build a car with Legos. And then you could ask them questions about it, about the story as they're interacting and playing with it. So today we're going to talk about Goldilocks and the Three Little Bears to inspire math moments and comprehension conversations while playing with the bricks. So I'd love for you to build alongside of us. So if you want to take a moment to grab your DUPLOs or your Legos or blocks of some kind, while you're getting ready, Aileen is going to read for us the story of Goldilocks and the Three Little Bears.
So this is, I'm going from a free online website, which is an internet archive, and it actually is just a library of all these books. And so what I'm going to do is just click this book, and you can check it out even yourself, and we can turn the pages digitally. So deep in the forest lived Daddy Bear, Mummy Bear, and Baby Bear. Our porridge is too hot, said Daddy Bear. Let's go for a walk while it cools. Someone else was out for a walk, a little girl called Goldilocks. Goldilocks was very hungry and very naughty. I will eat this porridge, she said. The first bowl of porridge was too hot. The second bowl of porridge, was too cold. But this porridge is just right, said Goldilocks. Now I want to sit down, said Goldilocks. The first chair was too soft and squishy. The second chair was too hard and smooth. But this chair feels just right, said Goldilocks. Oh, we can see what happened to the chair. I'm tired, young Goldilocks, so I'll find a place to sleep. The first bed was too rough and scratchy. The second bed was too frilly and flouncy. But this bed is just right, said Goldilocks. Soon the bears came home. Someone's been eating my porridge, growled Daddy Bear. Someone's been sitting in my chair, grumbled Mummy Bear. Someone's been sleeping in my bed, and there she is, squealed Baby Bear. Goldilocks ran out the door, and they never saw her again. The end. All right, so after reading that story, I hope that you noticed some of the things that we're going to highlight. But Bev, could you just talk a little bit about maybe some math moments where teachers can intentionally just highlight some mathematics that it's in the story?
Yeah, absolutely, Aileen. So one of the things that I loved in this book is all the comparison that was happening. And so sometimes when we think math, we think only numbers, but comparison, I mean, Goldilocks was comparing the porridge, she was comparing the beds, she was comparing the chairs. And so all of that, what's the same, what's different? Those are all kind of foundational to eventually kids comparing with numbers as well. So I love that. I love the curiosity of Goldilocks. I know she was a little naughty and wasn't doing what she was supposed to, but sometimes our curiosity does get us into trouble. But I love that curiosity because she's asking questions, and that's what we want from kids as well. And that's important in mathematics learning. And another one that I can think of is just this idea of all the opportunities with three around, and that concept of three and all of the things to count. I mean, there were legs on chairs to count. There was 3 chairs. There was bowls of porridge, a spoon. So many fun, playful counting opportunities that even though this isn't a math book, like there's so much math because there's so much math in our world all the time.
Yes.
And the other thing I love is that there were 3 in her family, but I love the idea of connecting with like your own family. So my family, there's my husband and I and 3 children. So there's 5 people in our family. And kids love talking about their family. I remember my youngest being able to think and name people in her family and count them much earlier than maybe applying that in other contexts.
That is so great. I really appreciate the aspect that you highlighted, was that it doesn't have to be a math book, or this is like, a book created for the mathematics in it, but that we can find the mathematics in other books. And that's what can be so powerful.
Yeah.
So as we're still talking about this idea of where's the mathematics in a lot of these narratives, but then using some sort of rich material to rebuild and reflect, I wanted to talk a little bit about just not only the counting that's going on there, but maybe also things like equality. Because Bev, you mentioned a comparison and how that can happen, whether you're talking about the numbers that you're comparing. You can compare other qualities and things, and that's what Goldilocks was doing. And I appreciate that, because that's where the math and science start working together, because science is where we get these ideas of what's scratchy and what's squishy and these quality words that we use to describe things. And that's really great, because math and science don't usually happen by themselves only. They happen together a lot. Yeah. And so equality is one of those pieces that I think is there as well.
Yeah, I love, even you can see in this picture, like shapes, like thinking about equality with shapes. And I know in geometry, we talk about congruence. So we might have slightly different words, but the big idea is still there. And I love how that situates in this idea of sameness and difference. Because really, I mean, we use that all the time in all sorts of conceptual development. And with Legos, I mean, even something as simple, I'm going to switch over to my document camera. Even just comparing, like, what bricks you have. So let's say there was a bunch of bricks out in front of the kids, and maybe one of them has this brick and another kid has this brick. So asking that question of, are these the same or are they different? And how could we prove it? How do we know?
Yes, that's so important. And I think that while children are playing, that's when teachers could start asking some of these questions. And one of the things that we've explored with is this phrase, or these words called guided play. So, open play is when children just go and play and use their imagination without any restrictions, any constraints. But usually in small groups or in the classroom, there are some constraints, like, you have an inside voice and you're sharing, and these other constraints that happen that are more structured within the classroom, and they can happen as outside as well. But I think guided play is the idea that the teacher can probe a little bit more to what the student is thinking or what they can do mathematically. And when you mention, like, if you're going to say, are these equal, you could say, are these the same? Or the teacher can do some side-by-side playing where, the teachers can say, remember the story of little, the 3 bears and Goldilocks? I'm going to make a bed, because I remember there were beds in that story. Do you remember there were beds? And they can talk about, and you can make a bed, and then you can ask, well, can you make a bed like mine? And then you can see if the child can replicate what you just built, which is that idea of sameness or equality. And they start constructing, what does equality really mean? It sounds like a big word for a child to use, but the actual concept is already starting to be built very young, at a very young age.
So I'm going to come back over here and think about, like, when you're talking about a bed, I was thinking about how the child might put the block on. So in the picture, even if I got the same blocks that you did, but I did not actually put it on the same way. Though that's all spatial reasoning with kids, and even looking at the different shapes and what that looks like. So there's so many questions that could be asked, and kids could actually get the blocks and literally put them next to each other. And they might be able to visually say, well, I noticed those aren't the same, but not be sure, like, well, how could I prove that one way or the other? And what I like about this is a perfect opportunity for counting, because hopefully you can see this well, but they could count, well, how many red circles do you see? Well, how many pink circles do you see? Is it the same? Is that the same amount? And that's a great opportunity for counting to actually be something that kids are using to answer a question that they had, or maybe articulate and describe why it's different.
Yes. And this is what we call spatial skills, spatial abilities. The idea that not only can you move your body in the living places that we have to move around in, but can you place objects in that space? And in this case, can you place objects in an identical way as someone else? And I know that children like to do that back and forth. So the teacher might be the first one to make a bed and then ask the child, can you make the same as me? And I am sure the child's going to change those roles and say, I made a table, or I made a different bed. Can you make my bed? Because they love to change the roles and then be kind of the leader. And that's great, because that's a great way to side by side and guide that play that's happening.
Yeah, and I love that, because that playful back and forth interaction is really teaching them such powerful social skills as well, because they're able to be in that role of like, okay, I am the one kind of directing something. Now I'm passing that to somebody else. And now I'm going to be able to take that back. And when the adult comes and does guided play, it's such a natural way for that to happen in a very non-threatening way for the child.
Yes, definitely. So we were going to move on to another concept, Bev, because not only can you teach, a lot of counting, which is probably the first go-to. We go to the counting in mathematics, but think about equality, but also think about multiplicity.
Yeah, definitely. So you can see in the picture on the slide that there are 3 beds here. And I know I talked earlier about how fun it is to kind of connect with the fact that there were 3 little bears and chairs. So I'm going to come over here. And once you make one of the beds, another question that you might ask is, well, what if I wanted to make a bed for all of the bears? And then you might say something like, well, how many more beds would I need? So I might call this orange block on top of the pillow and say, well, how many more pillows do I need? And then you're starting to see this replication. So maybe it starts with just replicating the pillow. And then, well, how many beds do I need? And then they have to, and what is the difference between the 2 blocks as well? But the big idea with multiplicity is this idea of like iterating a unit, or I like to sometimes just think about it as a stamp. So here's my stamp. This is what I'm starting with. It is a 4 circle or a 2x2 brick, and then underneath is a 4x2 brick. And that's the first one. So now I need to find those 2 same bricks, and I need to place them in that same way and then place them again. So that's this idea of multiplicity that can start to happen at a really young age. And maybe the child's not super excited about building the exact same bed every single time, and that's okay too. But what we're here to do today is just to kind of foster some ideas of things that can happen. I mean, maybe you're even asking, well, what if you wanted to make a bed for everyone in your family? And so now maybe that child, has 5 people in their family, and you're watching them count out 5. That is such a fun, playful opportunity for you even to just see them counting out that many and knowing what 5 is.
Because you're going to see the child have to hold the number that they're trying to build, right? So they're holding 3 or 5 in their head, they're building, and then you're probably going to see them checking how many they have so far. And that's, that counting and that monitoring is so important for young children to start building that kind of, and they're also, refining and really strengthening their sequence of numbers as well. One thing that is really great to do is maybe pick a number that they're skipping. So some kids skip a certain number in their sequence, or they forget that number and they stop up to that number. So going one more or exactly to the number that they're skipping in this playful way is having them practice without them really even noticing that they're practiced. Children don't usually like to just recite the counting strand, but when they're playing, they have some, goal in mind. That's when they really are motivated to really count.
Yeah, I love that because there's purpose to it. I mean, even as I was thinking about like building with bricks, I mean, it was hard for me sometimes to draw in some of my own children, or maybe when I've had some friends' kids come over. Like, not everyone just naturally loves bricks, but sometimes that's the power in the story. Well, let's build something from, the 3 little bears and Goldilocks. Well, what do you want to build? Well, I want to build the bed that breaks. Well, I want to build the chair. Okay, so then we build it. And then you can ask questions like, well, what came first? Did she sit in the chair first, or did she sleep in the bed first? And now maybe they don't know. So what do? They can go back to the book and they can look through the pages. But there's so much playful interaction and opportunity for kids to really reflect on something they recently experienced, which totally builds important conceptual foundations for them, but also to have a purpose for building. And even what I love about bricks is just the spatial, but even the shapes. So I'm going to move my camera again. So I like looking at these different shapes that you're seeing, even as you're moving the bed around. So when you stand it up on the top, you can see 2 rectangles on top of each other. Right here, you see 2 rectangles, but the pink rectangle is shorter than the blue one. I mean, there's just so many fun mathematical questions that can be asked. Well, what if we wanted to make a bed that's even bigger? Papa Bear is bigger than Baby Bear, so he needs a bigger bed. How could we do that? And there's a fun building challenge with that also you can add all sorts of mathematical questions. So maybe they even build it like this and they put the pillow right in the middle of it. So, but their innovation and their ability to decide how they want to make the bed just has all those math moments that are rich and purposeful because they're directly related to their goal.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things we had talked about before was as we're seeing children and asking them these prompts, purposely thinking, like, I wonder how they'll think about, can they make the same bed as me? But say a kid is supposed to make 5 and they stop at 4 and they said they're done, you know. But instead of saying, no, you didn't do it, maybe prompting them, well, did you count how many beds that you had? Things like this that are not necessarily the correction that you get from a performance, right? But just continue in that play, but then still guiding them with these questions and not necessarily correcting them. Because I've been with young children and they say, yeah, I made something exactly like you, and it's not quite right. But in my mind, it really just gives me that information that they need more experiences like this so that they'll notice the details that I want them to notice.
Right. I think that's the important thing. As the adult, you're asking the question, what are you here to learn about? If you're here to gather more information about what the child knows, the child tells you a lot, even when they don't make the exact same bed as you. Because if they know they didn't make the same bed as you, they just didn't really want to do the prompt that you asked. So, and then the nature of guided play is you really want that child to feel that autonomy. So you don't want to go in there and be like, no, you have to play a certain way. I mean, nobody really likes that, and it kind of shuts you down. I mean, there are places where maybe you're doing an assessment and you need a really specific answer, but that's not always the case. And we learn so much from kids, even when they don't do it exactly the way we expect. It's really just gathering that information, and they're giving us information all the time.
Yes, definitely.
So you want to talk about the last one?
Yes, let me bring up that slide.
Okay.
we had another idea about kind of starting with maybe a table and re-engaging them in that idea of equality, because can you make a table like mine is a little bit more of a detailed build, right? It takes a little bit more pieces. But then looking at another aspect is, can we build another table just like this one, but only use the square bricks instead of using the rectangular ones that we've used, the 2x4 ones?
So I have a question, Aileen. I built here a table and I've got my blue and my green brick, and this might be something that a child did, right? But it's not exactly the same. What might you ask to be able to draw their attention to the fact that it's lifted? There's a brick underneath it.
I might ask him to hold the one that I build and look at it carefully, to maybe count how many different colors they see, or say the colors that they see.
Okay.
Trying to just guide them to just notice a little bit more of the detail.
Right. And so in the picture, it's so hard to tell. I put 2 pictures on the slide so that people would notice that it's underneath, but there's that small square brick under on the bottom. But I love that idea of like, well, how many colors do you see? Well, I see pink, red, and green. Well, on this, I only see 2 colors. I see blue and green. So then being able to maybe flip the table over and realize, hey, there's that, it's like a square underneath. And putting that under there for it to match.
And in all these builds, I mean, think about the spatial vocabulary that's being used. So on top, underneath, on the side, these are really important vocabularies that children are building in the moment through the play.
Right. And the thing that I love about substitution is, like, let's say I don't have all of these bricks. Well, I could put 2 of them on top to replace it if I couldn't find one of these long bricks. And the reality is, I think kids really do this very naturally. They figure it out. I was watching my daughter build next to me as I was prepping for this presentation, and she found ways to figure it out, and it wasn't exactly, what she planned. So, but the idea is that we can highlight those moments for kids. So even if they were having trouble, let's say maybe they're having trouble with the 4 Legos, to flip them over and then put them on top like this. I mean, that takes a little more fine motor. But another option is simply to just take some bricks and maybe replace. So we had this one, let's replace it with these 2. Or you might even just let them put it on top like this. Let's make an even taller table.
So many different ways. But if you think about it, algebraic thinking is built on this very important thing of substitution, of equality. And at a very young age, they're engaging in some of those first building blocks and building that foundation of these concepts that we want them to have and to continue. And part of that is getting them to just notice things, but then the idea of substitution, you're right, children always are substituting something else for this, and maybe we can enhance that creativity and that thought process through these plays, these playing dynamics.
Right. I love it.
So, throughout this, very short time that we had together, these are the 3 really concepts that we highlighted today. Not to say we didn't highlight shapes. We also talked about counting, but I think these are 3 that sometimes we don't always highlight or focus on, because maybe they seem very academic, very, concepts for older children. But I hope that through these examples that we've given, you can see how these can be built in just through stories and through these narratives, playful times. So we wanted to share with you some of the resources that are not only on our website, but this specific resource tied to this presentation, Stories with Bricks, where we highlighted, the 3 components of play: create, observe, but also things that you can notice as either a parent or caregiver or teacher, and questions that you might ask in those moments. And it's just really a resource to support you in maybe the first way that you'll use some of these ideas from this presentation.
Yeah, and the key is, sometimes algebra feels like this intimidating topic for people, and we really wanted to try to kind of break down some of that to realize that some things that we really do very naturally in play while we're, building with bricks, that those are the foundations for algebraic thinking. And so those are written on the key concepts, and then there's questions. But this is meant to be just a jumping off point. This is not something to follow exactly. We want to inspire and encourage your own innovation and play as you interact with children, as they build and they tell stories, and are able to talk about that comprehension that they have sometimes with a story, or maybe they're just telling you about their day and they're building with bricks. So hopefully you can think of maybe a favorite story that you have that would be fun for kids to interact with this. Or maybe you've thought of something else. So we'd love to hear about that in the chat. And we're going to kind of move towards some question and answer for the next.
Before we do that, Bev, do you want to show the other cards as well? We have that download on our website for the
yes,
the building cards and ways that you can enhance the counting and maybe come up with new narratives in the play with bricks.
Okay, sure. Yep. So you can work your magic, Brian. So we'll cut and redo that. Okay. Do you want to stop sharing your screen, Aileen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so another classroom tool that we've used as we've talked about doing math with bricks is I'm going to switch over to my document camera, is some story cards for kids to play with. So, for example, we have two different versions, and these are downloadable on our website, aimcenter.org. You can see there's some lines on this. And so the question is, maybe you're asking the kids, well, how many bricks would it take to build the tree? And the kids can count if they want, or maybe they just start building with them. But there's also some comparison because you've got the tree and the house, and that, the house only needed 3 bricks and the tree had 4. So these are just other kind of playful, imaginative things to do with bricks. But we didn't stop there because you never know. There's always more opportunities. And we made some cards and took the lines off. And this is a great way for kids to just kind of think about and estimate how many bricks they might need to fill up the tree or the house. And there's other images other than just this one that I'm presenting today. But what's powerful is, let's say you have maybe 2 bricks on there, asking the kids, this is a hard angle to notice with the camera, how much is going to fill up the tree? They might say 1 more. And then when they put 1 more on there, you can, was that enough? Which is kind of, like I said, a little hard to see with the document camera. But these are just kind of for you to foster your own creativity as you tell stories and you build with kids and you find those math moments with them. And like I said, they're downloadable on our website at aimcenter.org.
And these are great to use in play center, like you set up a center and let kids come there during free play, or you can use them in a small group. You also can make them 3D. So if you want to put like the huge black paper clips right underneath, those will stand up and the kids can build like in a 3D mode where they're actually building towers, which I know they love to do. So yeah, I hope that those will be very helpful for anyone who'd like to download those. And quick send off to a printer on cardstock makes them very durable.
Awesome. So now we're going to go to our question and answer and talk about just any classroom ideas maybe that have come up for people. And we'll talk a little bit more and reflect on how you can connect with your own story with books and bricks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our session. We're going to do a little bit of Q&A right now to answer any questions that you may have. You're welcome to start sharing them in below and typing them into the browser there.
So I just put the link in the chat for the website for the cards that we were talking about. If you guys remember, I'm going to click over on my camera so you can see. This is where some of the cards do not have lines, and you can use the DUPLOs to estimate, and others of them actually do have lines on them. So that's kind of up to you. And something that we just want to really emphasize today is that part of this is just about exploration with kids. And so it isn't about right or wrong. You ask a question and you see what response the kids have. And you might have different purposes. The kids probably have different purposes, but you're learning together, and you're also hearing what their ideas are. And, don't be afraid to let the child lead or try something different and see what kind of responses you get.
Yeah, definitely. And any questions about printing them? We usually just took it to, our nearest printer, Office Depot, somewhere like that, and then printed them out on cardstock. It makes it pretty durable. Another way is to put the black clips underneath and then stand them up so kids can kind of build in a 3D, more 3D version. So explore the different ways that children are enjoying them, make a small group, a center, or do it with children, more facilitated if you like. It's really interesting to just watch them build, watch them count, see how they're doing some comparing, all in the goal to finish that picture. And that's exciting to see. Oh, so
another question, I was going to say, another question that someone asked about was just, connecting with different kids, and the story of Goldilocks maybe being around for quite a while. Today, we wanted to just kind of give an example of a story that might be familiar, but really this can happen with any story that you have. And we want to really emphasize that maybe there's certain books that your students just really, really love. So grab that book and take that same theme. The big ideas are really around just maybe creating an object from the story with the kids, maybe creating multiple objects and sequencing those so that then they can talk to you about the story. I find that especially young children love to pretend, and they love to reenact things again and again, maybe sometimes to our boredom, right? Sometimes kids want to do things way more times than we do, but that's how they're learning. That's their play. And so really, this is hopefully just a jumping off point for you to go have fun with your kids and learn with your kids and let them teach you, and you guide them as well.
Dorothy had a question about the black clips. So Dorothy, I'm talking about these huge kind of big paper clips. So if you put the card inside there and then just close it, these huge clips will be like stands for the cards to stand inside, and they'll hold it up while the child builds a tower in front of it. So these back clips, these are kind of jumbo size, but I think smaller ones will work depending on how big the card is and how you print it out.
So there's another question about the mats. And again, those are on the aimcenter.org website under resources. If you want to go there, we can make sure towards the end to put that as well. But if you go onto our website, you can also email one of us, and we're happy to show you where the link is.
Looking at any other questions coming in.
Another question someone was asking about modeling a bed. We had shown an example with a picture, but if you want to actually build the bed, there isn't there's not a right or wrong. It's about just kind of giving them an example, and then seeing whether or not they see their bed the same as yours. Because if they make it different, again, that's okay. The question is, do they recognize that it is different than yours? That's what's helping us see whether or not equality is happening with the kids. But they may have made it different on purpose because they didn't want to make the same bed as yours, and that's okay too. That's telling us something.
Sean asked a question about asking children, what colors on the top and bottom. So a lot of these spatial descriptor words, like on the side of or on between, top and bottom, children are developing what those words actually mean. So in the act of actually playing or building something, by asking what colors on the top, you're ensuring that the child can see, not only recognize color, but know what being on the top means. And so they're also practicing that vocabulary. You might be saying it in multiple languages because the child has a different home language, which is completely fine. But just reinforcing those vocabulary spatial words that we use sometimes, assuming children know that, but they're just developing what those words mean.
Yeah, that's such an important point, Aileen. So I moved over to my camera. That I just want to say again, when I first made the table, I didn't have a block underneath. And that's where, especially if it was live, in 3 dimensions, you could flip yours over and kind of say, well, what colors do you see? Do you have as many colors as I do? But color can often, if they don't have the spatial language yet, be a way to begin. And kind of that entry point for kids, so that then you can say, yes, there is a pink block. That pink block's on the bottom. And, we forget that spatial language is very challenging for kids because often it depends on the perspective. When I'm holding the table on its side, depending on where you're sitting, depends on whether it's behind the blue and green block or in front of the blue and green blocks. So that's something we have to realize is important.
Right. And that's so important because what children notice and how different children notice is important. So you might have a child who's like, if you say make a bed like mine, they're looking for the exact same colors that you use. And then you might have a child who doesn't think that the color matters, which is fine, but it's just for teachers to notice, what are children noticing? Are they noticing specific details? Does color matter to them? A lot of those things are really important. And when you talk about perspective, a lot of the tables we sit in when small children are circular. And if you put something in the middle and ask the children to build, are you seeing the children build according to their perspective? Sometimes children are able to build if they have a right side up. You'll see a child build something upside down or be able to turn it around as they build in their mind. And that's all amazing things to notice about their spatial visualization that they have in their head, that they've had those skills up to that point, and what opportunities can we give them to increase that, because that's a really important skill to have.
Yeah. Someone made a comment about like helpful hints to support teachers who are not as comfortable with mathematical thinking and math concepts. And the thing I just want to encourage you with is it's so easy for the kids to see our nerves. And if we can just get down and play and ask questions and not be afraid to say, I don't know, I'm not sure, but no, let's go figure it out together. You're really holding a posture that is what we want from young learners, which they kind of start with having. I think the fear we kind of maybe impose on kids, because when you think about a young kid, they learn things and they learn from failures very naturally. So we just want to continue to capitalize on that, but also not be afraid to say, well, I'm not sure, let's think about that. And then you can always come back to it, because again, they love repetition. So just start trying things and asking questions and develop that community within your other professional network to learn together and grow as you're presenting with DUPLOs or whatever new idea that is.
Definitely. And Barbara, I would say that any stories are good stories. Read the stories that you know your kids are loving, that are diverse, but any story can be, you know, something that you use in a STEAM activity. And the last stop on Market Street is a story about a little boy on the bus with his grandmother. And you might think, well, what's the STEAM there? But you can create like a neighborhood out of paper. You can talk about your own neighborhoods and create something with Legos. So just using the STEAM maybe activity to reflect about what the story meant or how we can express that story in different ways. So it doesn't have to be a STEAM book. Maybe we're looking for those STEAM books, but really any books that the kids are enjoying.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Well, guys, it looks like it's 11 o'clock, which means I think our time is up. Thank you, everyone, for all of your questions and your comments. We really appreciate learning together with you guys.
Thank you, everyone.